you can't really have a conversation with someone if they don't realize that racism is real. There are so many people that are saying Black Lives Matter today, but we're not saying Black Lives Matter even 6 months ago. And so you've got to do some sort of acknowledgement about what's happening. Why are Black people hurting?
I'm here with Charity Dean, the director of the Detroit Civil Rights, Inclusion, and Opportunity Department. Charity, thank you so very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, so first of all, let's just start at the top. What is the Detroit Civil Rights, Inclusion, and Opportunity Department?
So our department is the oldest municipal department dedicated to civil rights in the country. It actually started in the city of Detroit after the 1943 race riots. Mayor Jeffries started an interracial committee to understand what was going on with the racial tension. Today, we do a lot of things. We work with Detroit-based businesses to connect them to opportunities. We do compliance on any development or projects to get incentives to make sure Detroiters are being hired. And then obviously we investigate any claims of discrimination in the city of Detroit. City of Detroit's civil rights code is actually much more expansive than the state of Michigan and obviously the federal civil rights statute. So it is illegal in the city of Detroit to discriminate based on public benefit status. Obviously race, gender, but sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression are all protected classes in the city of Detroit. And so we have a team that investigates those claims. We also make sure that residents that want to access city departments in their native language can do that. So we have a language access program where we're translating and providing interpretation services for residents. So we do a lot of things, but ultimately our job is to make sure that Detroiters are represented and are included.
So I'm talking to you today because we saw the Facebook message that you put out through the Detroit Civil Rights Facebook page. ACT was the acronym that you chose to go with, and that was acknowledge pain, confront bias, and talk. So just, I guess, expand on that a little bit for me. Why did you come to those things? How did you come to that? And, you know, what made you decide to post the message in the first place?
Well, a lot of reasons. Obviously, our country is hurting, but I was hurting. You know, as a Black woman in a Black city, leading a civil rights department, I was torn. You know, I understood the frustration and the anger that I saw, but also was like heavily burdened with like, what do we do? How do we respond? And it's really odd, you know, as Black people, we are burdened with the pain, but also are burdened with the drive to fix the problem that is burdening us. It's a unique situation that we're in, but there are so many people, and mostly actually people that have reached out that were not people of color, and they said, what can we do? And our department started a series last year called Let's Talk About Race. And so we were having conversations already around the city of Detroit, inviting people of color with non-people of color to sit down and talk about racial issues. And so I wanted to put out a message that really transcended where you stood, but gave people something that they could do today. Because what I recognize and what I know, you know, my team has said is we're at this for the long haul. We've been at it before, and we're going to be at it for the long haul. But at least right now, today, what can you do? You know, and so acknowledging the pain is really the first step. You can't really have a conversation with someone if they don't realize that racism is real. There are so many people that are saying Black Lives Matter today, but we're not saying Black Lives Matter even 6 months ago. And so you've got to do some sort of acknowledgement about what's happening. Why are Black people hurting? And then confronting bias is another huge one. We all have bias. I have biases, right? They're based on how we were raised. And that's the next step. After you acknowledge, okay, this pain is real, now what? But then you have to look internally and say, what about me? And that message, you know, it transcends all, but it was really for those people who have been reaching out and saying, what can I do? A lot of folks who weren't people of color saying, what can I do? And it confronts your own bias, and then being open to have a conversation about it. So talking to people, I think that's one of the ways that we can affect change.
Right. So one of the other things that you mentioned in the video, and like as you just did, is the consistent effort that's being put forward. And you said that you are planning on engaging and doing more organizing in the future. And I guess my question is, what is the engagement going to look like moving forward, and what is going to be being organized? Who's going to be involved, and so on and so forth?
So sorry. Okay.
Oh, you're fine.
So the first thing we're doing is we are participating. We were invited by a group of young millennial activists who are planning a march on Friday. And, they really said that this is not a protest, and we fully support protests, right? I mean, that's how our department was formed. But they want to demonstrate, they call it the March to Selma. And they want to recreate the March to Selma on the Belle Isle Bridge. And it's the idea being that we're going to march, we're going to talk about what's happening, but we're going to be registering people to vote, telling people to sign up for the census. So it's really about marching to action, and we're excited to participate. That's the first thing we're going to be doing on Friday. But again, we're in this for the long haul. So the work that we've been doing around Let's Talk About Race, we're going to continue. I mean, during COVID-19, we connected New Detroit with Pepsi so that they could fund racial bias training for healthcare workers when we saw that COVID-19 decimated the Black community. We're 13% of Michigan's population, but 40% of the deaths. There is a real issue here. And so our department is going to continue to work hard to solve them.
So what type of resources do you guys have available to you to do this kind of work? And, what are some of the things that you could use or need? And, what concrete changes are you moving toward?
So the resources that we have is we are a city department. So we, as a city government, we have the power to convene, call people together. And so that's what we've been utilizing to forge ahead. But we also are working with a group of city council members who are super passionate about this issue too. And so what we said when we started our Let's Talk About Race conversations was that we really wanted to take the meat of those conversations to drive policy change. And we started in November. Our last one was in February, and then COVID hit. And so we were trying to figure out, how do we continue having these? I mean, we were having, 70 and 80 people in these rooms, sitting at tables, having this racial dialogue. We're going to have to forge ahead in a new way. And so we're thinking about that. But we are so open to, we're open to a lot. We're looking at, I also chair the Equity Council for the mayor. So we have an Equity Council that consists of city department heads that are looking at every single thing we do, from hiring to procurement to entrepreneurship, to make sure that what we're doing is reaching the Black community. And so, Detroit is a Black city, is 80% Black. I think is a little bit over 80% Black. And so everything that we're doing is trying to make sure that Detroit is a place where people feel safe. It's a place where people have an opportunity, and a place where they see themselves in leadership. And I'll tell you, if you've been watching these protests, it's been sad to see. It's been sad to see these protests happen with non-Detroiters coming in. That a number of the folks that are coming to throw rocks and damage people have not been from Detroit. And that's what's been, I think, most heartening to hear from the community activists and the community folks that are saying, we're down here because we're mad. But the folks that are throwing their rocks are literally 75% of arrests, I think, on Saturday night were, it was 80%. We're not from Detroiters. So we have to struggle with that. But what we've seen in the city of Detroit is a police force that does have its challenges. We all do. I mean, there's not a city in America that doesn't have a racial issue. But what we've seen in the city of Detroit is a real effort from the Detroit Police Department to be engaged in the community, and when there have been issues, to resolve them. I think about, we have neighborhood police officers. So I know if you're active in a neighborhood in Detroit, generally, you've got neighborhood police officers that are there to handle those issues. When we had the issue with the police officer with the Black woman last winter, that it was big fallout, and he left her walking on the side of the road and called her by Felicia and all of that, and that was handled pretty swiftly by DPD. So we've got issues in Detroit, but a lot of the issues really stem from people not doing that internal check on themselves. Police officers are people. When their uniform is off, they are at the grocery stores, they're at restaurants. And so however you're thinking as a person is going to translate into your job, whether you're a police officer, whether you're on the city council, whether you are at a restaurant serving people. And so I think the first step is really to cause people to do that internal work.
So from your perspective, as you just mentioned, how is the relationship between the police department and all sorts of things that we're seeing go on with the protests? How is that affecting the work that we're even able to do when the relationship is still so tense?
Are you speaking nationally or in Detroit?
I'm speaking about Detroit.
So, I think what we've seen in Detroit is not what we've seen in other cities. It doesn't mean that we don't have our issues, but some of the things you do, President Obama laid out a plan encouraging community policing, right? There is data to show that when police officers live in the neighborhoods where they serve, you generally don't have as much. That doesn't mean that it's the answer, but it's one of the solutions. And so one of the problems is in the state of Michigan, it's literally illegal to have a residency requirement. You can't do that anymore. You used to could do it. In fact, it used to be the law, and now that's illegal. And so what we have is, even though Detroit is a super progressive city, it's got a very conservative state. And so state law, a lot of times, is limiting things that, action that we want to take in the city. But that didn't stop us from identifying. So we've probably got about 60 officers that are considered neighborhood police officers. And their job is a particular neighborhood. They get to know the neighborhood there. If there's any community event, or the district managers, the way Detroit is set up, we've got 7 districts, and there's district managers. All the district managers are engaging the neighborhood police officers. And all the community folks generally know. If you go on DetroitMI.gov, you can put in your address, and it'll tell you who your city council person is, who your neighborhood police officer. Those types of things really help to build a relationship between police and the community. But the biggest thing is bias. Not making a decision about a person the way that they look. The biggest thing that you're going to be able to do is do that, because you could have someone that lives in the neighborhood and it still is biased against people of color. So you have to deal with that. You got to make sure everybody's dealing with that, because a lot of times these racial issues translate, they spill over, and then it's not the police. Now we're talking about a restaurant that didn't serve me. Now we're talking about this other issue, and it's because it is biased. People are making decisions about people the way that they look, and we are not getting national leadership on this issue. And so until, frankly, people that don't look like me and you get upset and really try to force change, we'll continue this conversation. And so I think what I've seen, as much as my heart is still broken right now, there is a glimmer of optimism, because I am seeing something that I've never seen before, which are conversations about bias from people who would have ordinarily been afraid to talk about it.
Right. So what is your organization asking, people to do? What are you asking Black America to do? What are you asking white America to do moving forward?
I'm asking Black America to take care of yourself, to heal. I'm asking white America to get angry, to take on this burden, to not ask Black people, don't ask the victim to remove the boot from his neck. You'll remove the boot from the victim's neck. Do not put that burden on Black people alone. It shouldn't be our burden alone. We didn't create the structure, right? And as Black people, It is, we know this burden all too well. This is not new to us. This is not a newfound issue to us. But just protect your mental health. Sometimes you got to unplug from the TV. Sometimes you just got to kiss your babies and love on each other to heal. But don't take on this burden on your own, because we can't. I saw the video of it was 3 black men, and 40-year-old black man was trying to throw something, and the 30-year-old black man was telling him, no, that's not, we got to be better than this. And then he took the 17-year-old black man and said, don't do it like we did it, because it hasn't worked. And people were sharing that video and talking about how powerful it was. And to an extent, it was powerful. But to an extent, it's like sad, because we cannot fix this system that we did not build.
Right. So
we can, yeah.
How, I guess I'll wrap it up with this. How are you doing? How are you feeling? What's been on your mind?
What has been on my mind is the terrific, huge, monumental burden that rests upon Black people to tear down a structure that we didn't build, that wasn't built for us, that was built on our backs. I think that's been on my mind. And doesn't mean we're not going to fight, right? Doesn't mean that I'm tired, that I'm not gonna continue to push against the structure. But everything that I've said to white allies that have reached out is, you've got to get angry, and you've got to get frustrated, and you've got to use your privilege to knock this down. Otherwise, it won't happen. And so that is on my mind. And I am praying for the family of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. I'm still praying for Trayvon Martin's family. I'm still praying for Tamir. I'm still praying, because the pain doesn't go away. And when you don't see justice, and when you see the same thing happening over and over again, I'm sure it just makes that pain even worse. I'm praying for my people, but I'm praying that this time something happens.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org, or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.